Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Movie Mortis, where movie madness lives. And while this may be a podcast, we're going to be doing a little sub-series, if you will. Drew, would you like to explain this series?
Yeah, so I guess for now we're going to call this Why Horror Matters. And it's, as you can tell from the name, it's all about the horror genre. And more specifically, it's we're going to talk about the horror movies in a way to where we talk up to where we explain their cultural significance, their artistic merit, and just in general why horror movies are good.
Yeah,
And what's so fun about this is that one of our co-hosts, Tim, isn't super big into horror, so we're gonna help explain why it's cool.
yeah. Tim, do you have anything to say?
Not really.
Alrighty. So, the first movie we're going to be discussing is A Nightmare on Elm Street, which
Yes, released
Drew is
in
a big fan of.
1984. Yes, originally released in 1984 and directed by Wes Craven, the one of the masters of horror. Um, and so I'm sure most of you guys listening to this know the story already.
Mm-hmm.
It's about Freddy Krueger who stalks people in their dreams
Yep,
and kills people in their dreams.
yep.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
simplifying the plot a bit, but
No, that's fine. It's fine. Sometimes you gotta do an elevator pitch. Anyways,
yes.
Tim, you already we already explained what Nightmare on Elm Street's about, but do you have any like prerequisitions or what do you already know about Nightmare on Elm Street?
Well, I know it's a very popular horror movie. Freddy Krueger himself is insanely popular, and despite being I don't know, like a very nasty villain, just with hardly any redeeming qualities. I mean, no tragic backstory to back it up, unlike Jason.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so he is really. I just know he's really friggin' terrifying. So
Yeah.
I
Uh,
mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big lover of sleep. So having somebody who can kill you in your sleep is pretty terrifying.
I mean, to be honest, I actually really hate the concept of dying in sleep. To be honest, so
What?
well,
What?
it just like not when you're like old and aging. I mean, like when you're still young. It just that shit kind of unnerves me a bit. Like imagine like, oh boy, I cannot
Oh
imagine
yeah,
like you're still young and you're like, oh boy, I
I'll
can't
be
wait to
honest.
do what?
I'll be honest. I thought you meant it in a way through it's like this concept for this movie is lame.
No, 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 I no,
I
no,
thought you
no,
meant it in
no,
that
but
way.
no. But like, what's interesting about Nightmare on Elm Street is that Freddy kills people in their sleep, but they actually have
Yeah,
like physical body scars and stuff. Like when
yeah,
Nancy wakes up, she has like a scratch on her dress, and she doesn't know how she got
yes,
that. And it even
yeah,
escalates further in the dream world. Basically, it's kind of like what affects you in the dream world affects you in the real. It's like Family Guy said it best: when you poop in your dreams, you poop for real. I had to get
yeah.
that reference in.
And do you want to know what's something really terrifying? Do you guys know that this that the story of Nightmare on Elm Street was actually inspired by something real?
Yeah, actually, I read about that. Did you know about that, Tim?
yeah, I believe you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, it's yeah. Drew, tell the story again.
Yeah,
So
Drew brought that up. So
there was these I think there were migrants and I think Vietnam, I think in the 1970s, who kind of randomly started experiencing these horrible nightmares to the point where they wouldn't sleep. So it was like they would go long periods without sleep and all that. But of course, since the human body is, where we automatically go to sleep after like a long period of time without sleeping. And so they eventually did go to sleep because like their body kind of, it forced them to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then they mysteriously died in their sleep.
Damn,
Like
that's
pretty much all of
crazy.
them mysteriously died of their sleep. All of them who were
It it's
previously
all
experiencing these nightmares
it's
and
all
a lot of medical professionals. This is going to sound horrible, but a lot of medical professionals dubbed it as quote Asian death syndrome is what it was
Asian
called at
Death
the
Syndrome.
time. Yeah.
Was it only prominent people
So
in Asia?
I guess so. I mean, it happened in Asia. It happened in, I think, Vietnam. I think one of those kind of Southeast Asian countries.
Hmm.
But yeah, that idea is what kind of inspired Wes Craven, who of course also wrote this film as well.
Hmm. Kind of reminds me of a
To
horror story I
yeah.
read where like the every day something would get closer to somebody, but when it finally reached them, I think it ends kind of ambiguously implying that the person died. I can't remember the name of the story. It's like something I read online, but that's what kind of reminds me of a little bit. But again, dying in your sleep at a young age is very unnerving. Because just imagine like you got your whole life ahead of you, and I mean I'm pretty sure there are worse ways to go, but just imagine it just kind of sucks.
Yeah, I'm all yeah.
But like I said, as I mentioned before, Freddy actually leaves marks behind. And as I
Hmm.
mentioned before, what happens to you in the dream world happens to you in the real world. One of the things I wanted to consider on my first, well, I thought about my first watch about it. I watched it 2 times. Was like if
Hmm.
there was some kind of psychological aspect to it, because I remember we did in my psychology classes we did discuss dreams, and I don't really think there is much of a psychological aspect to it other than like Freddy just kind of hops in your dreams, but like everyone's dreams kind of the same. It's like a very like it takes place in a kind of a real worldish scenario, but there's still like the industrial side of it, like the boiler room and everything. And
Hmm.
so I guess I don't know if like boiler rooms in industrial areas are like associated with like nightmares or something, but um
Well, so I might be going into a little bit of into the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but Freddy Krueger is his kind of backstory is revealed in later movies. He worked at a some sort of like I think it was like some factory or nuclear plant or something when he was alive, when he was still a person, a living person.
mhm.
Because remember, as is explained in The Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, is that he was a child murderer.
Yeah.
And so that boiler room is where he would take the
The children to kill
kids
them.
to be killed.
Yeah.
And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the boiler room in the reality of Nightmare on Elm Street, not the dream world, but the reality,
Mhm.
was located beneath where he worked.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Um
So 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 that's kind of, and also too, it's very, like you said, it has that industrial feel to it, and
yeah.
it
So
works.
there
And also something I wrote in my notes too is one of the things that's pretty cool about the movie in terms of like the visuals and everything is that boiler room in the climax of the film is like the third basement essentially of Nancy's house. And so it kind of feels like, and all the dream sequences kind of have this feel to where as you go further down, the lighting gets more, the shadows become a lot more omnipresent, and the lighting becomes a bit gloomier, and it
mhm.
almost feels like you're descending into hell.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, cuz there's I think in a way there's just something about like empty industrial areas at night that feel like let's say a boiler room or just like any kind of warehouse with a bunch of machinery. It just feels all so ominous, like maybe you're not supposed to be there. And
Yes.
I think the only time that there ever was a psychological part in Nightmare on Elm Street is probably somewhere close to the ending and the scene. So, Tim, there's a scene in the movie where after a few like nightmares of Freddy, they take her to like some kind of doctor. Was her name Nancy, the main protagonist, Nancy?
Yes,
Yeah,
Nancy.
yeah, Nancy.
Nancy Thompson.
So Nancy gets taken to like some kind of psychologist where they try and analyze her brainwaves and stuff while she sleeps, and like
Mhm.
they see like the rapid eye movement, and eventually she starts like shaking and screaming, and then they wake her up, and I guess in the ending, so here's one of the Nightmare on Elm Street. I think gets a very ridiculous by the ending because here's the thing: like she eventually realizes the only way to make Freddy go away is just not believing in him for some
Well, I
reason.
also think that's, well, I also think because that's like, any of these monsters, any of these horror monsters, they stop being scary once you stop fearing them,
Hmm.
as kind of corny as that may sound.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that part I don't even think is the most ridiculous part of the ending.
Well, I think I was going to
But
get to
the
that too. The
but
ending is
but
also
which
very
we'll talk
ridiculous.
about in a minute,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about in a minute. But the so that part where she's yes, it is a bit ridiculous, but I think it kind of one of the major themes of the movie is the power of fear. Because remember, Freddy is powerless once you stop fearing him. He's fed by fear, as the amazing song The American Nightmare by Ice Kill says in its lyrics, is that he's fed by fear, and that's expressed in this movie because like he's a demon, right? So
Mhm.
I hope I'm not, you know, overcomplicating things
No,
here,
well,
um, but that's kind of the theme of the movie. One of the major themes of the movie is the power of fear, which is a pretty standard theme for a horror movie to explore. But I think that's kind of that's a kind of an extension of that.
hmm
Now, as far as the rest of the ending goes, what the fuck?
yeah, like everyone comes back to life, and then like they get in the car, and oh no, it's a Freddy car. Y'all all gonna die.
that
Drive off
is
in the
that
distance, see the
is
kids jumping rope
that
and
is
everything. So,
yeah, that is the one. That is the one thing I like genuinely dislike about this movie is that ending,
yeah,
because
but
it's so hammy.
sorry,
It's so just it's such a tonal shift from the previous scene. It's
yeah.
jarring, and it actually does kind of make sense when you figure out that that ending was actually a last minute mandate by the studio,
Wait, the
by New
studio
Line
did
Cinema, the
that?
studio.
I didn't think the
Yeah,
studio. Okay, so Tim, I kind of explained this like a very dumb way, but so in the ending of Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy defeats Freddy by like believing he doesn't exist, and Freddy goes away,
yeah,
happy ending and all. The next day, everyone somehow comes back to life, including the people who died, like Johnny Depp's
mhm,
character, who I want to mention later
mhm,
that I want to talk about him later, but
yeah,
eventually, it's like a normal happy day. They're going to school in the car. They get into a convertible car, Nancy and her three friends, and then the convertible comes up, and it's the same color as a Freddy Krueger's shirt, the stripes and everything.
yeah,
It drives off into the distance where they're all screaming, and then next to them you see, and the final shot's like these girls jumping on jump rope, which in the beginning of the movie is like implying that Freddy's like an urban legend because in the beginning of the movie, after like the first dream sequence, you see these girls jumping ropes saying 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. I probably just butchered the last lyric, but it just gets a little crazy. And I think that's really weird how a studio would say at the last minute because most studios kind of want more of a, not most studio. I'm not trying to say
so
all
so
studios are pro happy ending,
so
but they
so
want less of a
too
miserable
much.
ending. They think a less
So,
miserable ending would.
so I believe the original ending was supposed to be more of a happy ending, but the studio changed it because I guess at the last minute, Robert Shea, who was the head of New Line Cinema and the producer on this movie, wanted to have an opening for sequels.
Hmm.
So that's why. That's why the
Okay.
ending was. To my understanding, Wes Craven was actually against the ending, but because the producer wanted it, that's what was in the movie.
Wait. Tim, what are your thoughts on
So.
that? Oh shit, Tim, I think you're muted. I can't hear you, bro.
Wait.
What are your thoughts on the fact that the weird ass ending from Nightmare on Elm Street was mandated by the studio instead of the original last scene, which was her defeating Freddy by not believing him and then reuniting with her dad?
And I'm just saying that they should defeat Freddy. I just hate that villains like that get off scot free into everything. It just doesn't sit right with me. You know.
Hmm. You basically
You know
want
what,
people
Tim?
to stay dead.
Yeah, Tim, it's funny that you mentioned that because, as you guys know, Freddy was a child murderer. The reason that he was killed was because he got set free by the justice system,
Yeah.
as it's explained in the scene with Nancy and her mom
Yeah.
Marge. Is that the reason that the citizens killed Freddy is because he got off on a technicality
Yeah, and
as a
so they burned
failure
him
of the
alive.
justice system. So they burned him alive
Yeah.
for as punishment for his crimes.
And his ghost
And I
haunts
just
the
feel think it's
dreams.
funny. Yeah, and it's just kind of funny that Tim mentions that because that's another. theme of the movie, right? Is the failure of the justice system and the town citizens kind of taking justice into their own hands,
Mm-hmm.
and then it coming back years later to nip them in the butt, sort of, so to
Oh, okay.
speak.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I always thought it was just more about the fear of sleep and everything. To be honest, I didn't
It
think
is.
that was a.
I mean, it is about that too. It is about that too.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know about
Or,
that. But I do find it
I
a little
felt yeah.
maybe it's just I think in a way like if I feel like with Nightmare on Elm Street, it's one of those things you're not supposed to overthink because there is a lot of suspension of disbelief, like how suddenly Nancy can grab Freddy's hat out of her dream.
why is that so sudden?
Not really so sudden, but just I mean, it does kind. I mean, like it's one thing to leave like physical marks, but I guess in a way, if you're gonna be pulling hats out, it makes you wonder like how did it's like can you do that with all of Freddy's clothing? Can you do it with like the glove or maybe can you take a dash of his blood off your film? It kind of leaves room either for the imagination or just something like that. I don't know. It just I like I said, like I said, I think my mistake was trying to think about the psychological aspects of this because again, dreams are also part of the brain, and I know other films like Inception has covered
Well,
they
I think this movie does have a psychological aspect to it
do
because,
tell.
again, something else I have in my notes is that don't you notice that as the film goes on, Nancy's hair gets grayer and her mental state seems a bit like, you know, her mental state kind of seems deteriorated by the end of the movie to a
No,
degree.
I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that. Like
So
I watched it 2 times, and quite frankly, I didn't notice her hair color changing.
it's kind of emphasized, I think, in one scene. Anyways, so um, that's kind of a side effect of sleep deprivation. And so the movie is kind of exploring a little bit on how you can kind of get a bit more paranoid and you can kind of seem like you're going crazy after a long time without sleep, you
Interesting. I
know?
didn't. I mean, that's definitely one way of looking at that. Um, I didn't know about that. I always thought it was just them being more paranoid of the killer, but I guess with the idea of nightmares and people being afraid of it, that kind of does take into account with Freddy Krueger. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Take me
And
on
again,
the.
Freddy is also kind of psychologically tormenting Nancy with all of his his ability to kind of contort dreams
Yeah,
and
and also use like
even
traumatizing memories as like for an
yes,
example after the first girl died. I don't remember her name. After the
Tina.
first Tina, sorry, just usually when a character dies pretty early on, I tend to forget them, and I don't mean that. I mean that with a lot of media, by the way. So
Yeah.
um, like Tina, she dies, and like Freddy uses like a figuration of her corpse in a bag as a means of taunting Nancy in the school nightmare. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And
so
something else I kind of wanted to talk about too is, the movie kind of psychologically messes with the audience too, because the transition between the waking world and the dream world is often very subtle.
yeah.
Like for example, like in the scene in the classroom when Nancy is kind of just you can kind of see her starting to doze off as the teacher, who I believe is played by Lynn Shay, who's the I think wife of Robert Shay, the producer. Fun fact. So and you kind of see she just kind of closes her eyes and then she opens her eyes and the camera cuts to Tina in the body bag, in the
Mm,
bloody body bag. And so the film kind of messes with you in that way because you don't know, is it a dream, is it, I mean, you can kind of figure out that it's a dream, but you don't know when Freddy will appear
mm.
because Freddy appears as the janitor, remember,
Oh
as that
yeah, the
janitor.
janitor.
He appears
Oh,
as the
the hall
janitor.
pass, hall pass actually,
The
hall monitor,
hall
not janitor,
pass,
hall
the,
monitor.
the janitor, hall monitor, or whatever. And she was, and you officially, like, you can kind of tell, but it's Freddy that you don't, but he doesn't appear as Freddy. He only appears in the only shows to where she's Freddy when she brings the glove up and she's like and she says something to Nancy.
Mm,
But
yeah,
the movie kind of does things like that um as a way to kind of psychologically mess with both Nancy and the audience as well.
interesting.
And remember, as well as the and even in some of the dream sequences, when especially when the background is often lit in very like bright white.
Hmm.
Don't you notice that how the background is lit in pretty bright white
In
to
certain
kind of
parts, yeah.
represent yeah, to kind of it does kind of help represent the dreams, but also kind of shows you like the light at the end of the tunnel. Not the end of the tunnel, but kind of the opposite, where when somebody's performing CPR on
Yeah,
somebody,
don't go into the
they're like
light.
stay away from to go into the light. So it kind of represents that because it's like Freddy's trying to kill you,
Yeah.
and so you can kind of view going into the nightmare as like going into the light essentially.
Yeah. Tim, what do you make of all this from an
I
outsider
hope I
looking
didn't
in?
overcomplicate it.
What do you make of all this from all the stuff we've explained? Is this from an outsider point of view? Got anything to say about this?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is kind of wild. That's I will say it's wild in general. Like how you have such a concept, based on like the whole, Vietnam refugees thing and the whole like behind it. I mean, influence behind it. I mean, that's kind of strange. And I thought of this like plot that like I don't know, like it would spread his influence to other crazy people, driving them crazy, like forming a cult and spreading his terror across the world. That's what I just thought I was gonna bring it up. You know what
I
I'm
mean, I
saying?
mean
Like,
the later movies kind of get a bit more
Yeah.
like that a little bit,
I've only
but
seen the
not this
second
first
one,
movie though.
so I mean that's the only. I mean I've seen the first one, but in terms of sequels, I've only seen the second one, and the second one was a little too batshit insane. Like it kind of turned a silly for me. It kind of turned a silliness factor up by so much. It kind of drowned out whatever horror is trying to go for.
Well, I think that might have been a little intentional too, but again, we'll discuss the probably the Nightmare sequels at a different time.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
dude, do you know what I just realized? We've talked a lot about Freddy Krueger, but yet we haven't talked about the guy who plays him, Robert Englund.
Robert England.
Dude, that man's a legend, man.
Did he do anything else outside
He
of Freddy?
all
Was he or was Freddy his like one hit wonder?
I mean, he's the one other movie I know he's appeared in is the Urban Legend from the late '90s, but he's mostly known for Freddy Krueger. Let me see here. I got his IMDb pulled up here.
Hmm.
Um,
While you're pulling that
yeah,
up,
Nightmare on Elm Street, The Quantum Devil, Under the Bed. And some of these are newer movies.
um,
Um, Let me
while you're
see some of
pull
his older
while
ones.
you're pulling that up, I just want to say I remember hearing a reviewer jokingly say that every time he sees Freddy Krueger, he thinks about fried chicken because of his face.
Oh, that's pretty gross.
I mean, when I think now that I've actually seen the movies twice. Well, the first movie twice, second movie once. I feel like there's a bit of a cruel irony in that because Freddy in the universe died via fire, and this guy fakes fried chicken. You cook that stuff up and eat it. I think there's a bit of a cruel irony in there, if you ask me. Oh,
Yeah, Robert Englund was also in Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, Hatchet. He's been in a
Hatchet,
lot of horror
Hatchet,
movies. That's
Hatchet.
kind
That
of what
sounds so
he.
familiar. I feel like that's more of an action movie than it is a horror movie.
No, no, it's a horror movie.
Uh,
Yeah, Urban Legend. He plays one of the professors in Urban Legend. He's also in Wishmaster and a lot of B movies here is what I'm
okay.
seeing
So
from.
while we're talking about this, one thing I realized is that Freddy kind of slowly makes the dreams his own domain. Like, in the concept
Yeah.
of dreams, your brain now, if you can lucid dream, you can create your own environment. But like with like dreams, normally your brain just creates whatever. But when Freddy comes up, it's just like he makes his own domain, and to any weebs in the audience, you might get this, but it's essentially his own domain expansion. I had to make that joke there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah, that's what makes Freddy so effective as a villain is that he can kind of and it's a lot more upfront, I guess. I'm trying to figure out the word to say it, but it's a lot more elaborate in later movies because they get a bigger budget and everything.
hmm,
But in this movie, he can kind of
yeah,
contort dreams a little bit. But that's what's so effective. That's because when you're in his domain, he has all the power.
Oh yeah.
You can't
Drew, you froze, man. You froze.
really contort your dreams the way he can. What?
You froze, man. You literally cut out like for a solid 3
All
seconds.
right, well, all right, well, you can still hear me, right?
I did, but I want you to go by that again because it's just like, oh shit, are we having problems? I got scared.
No,
Okay, well, all right, well, hope,
I'm
yeah,
not having problems on my end.
okay, well, all right, good, yeah, you kind of froze up for a bit, not 3 seconds. I want to say about a half, about a second and a half. You're good, man. I was like, oh shit, Drew froze. Anyways, so one thing I feel like I think we one thing we need to talk about is Nancy, our protagonist, because I actually did a little
Yes.
research when I first watched the movie, and I didn't do research. I mean, I watched it a second time to get my thoughts on her, but did you know, Tim, that Nancy came about because if I Drew, you can correct me on this because you're the expert here. Nancy came about because I think Wes Craven's daughter said she didn't really like how a female was constantly victimized in his last horror movie. Is that true, Drew? Help me out here. I'm
That
lifeline.
sounds true. That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, again, you're the expert. I'm trying to remember something I read from like a long time ago. Actually, I'm not gonna pull it up because that would require me going through so much stuff right now. But I definitely remember reading about that. Or if not, the YouTube comments can scrutinize me for getting some trivia wrong. YouTube comments, please be
Yeah, that that
gentle.
that that sounds right. I know Wes. There were times when this is unrelated, but his other big movie series, Scream, he initially turned down the opportunity to direct that movie, but he only eventually agreed to do it. Well, A, because Drew Barrymore was attached to the project, but also because a kid came up to him at a convention and was like, "When are you going to make another badass movie?" Like, that's what they said to him. Like, when are you going to make
Badass.
a badass movie? Yeah, something like that. Like, when are you going to make another badass movie?
I mean, technically, I mean, what were the Nightmare sequels that ridiculously dumb?
Well, he didn't. Outside of writing Nightmare 3, he didn't have any involvement in the Nightmare sequels.
Oh,
He
okay.
was doing other things.
Yeah,
So
like that.
um
That's how Nancy came
he was doing
about. And
yeah. So
sorry,
like I
you
said,
keep talking, keep talking,
that's
keep talking. I'm
why
sorry, bro.
yeah, that's why what I was trying to say that it sounds very plausible. I just don't
Yeah.
remember
But yeah,
reading that off the top of my head.
basically, he had Nancy as a protagonist idea because he wanted to make a female character who wasn't always the damsel screaming. She wanted, like, because the thing with Nancy is that eventually, like by the end of the movie, she decides, okay, we're gonna try. I'm gonna fight Freddy Krueger. I'll play on your turf now if you want. Um, I don't know if would you say her development's gradual, Drew? Her development of trying to stop Freddy. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's gradual, especially since she doesn't get much help from outside.
Yeah, she doesn't.
So
She's
she kind of has to be this. She has to go face Freddy herself,
hmm.
and I think another kind of trope that appears in a lot of Wes Craven movies is, and a lot of times the police or the law enforcement characters aren't exactly the most useful characters.
They make fun of that and how it should have how Scream should have ended.
Yeah, and the Scream series is a perfect example. As much as we love Dewey, um, but he's kind of an example of that kind of like he means well, but
Hmm.
he's not the greatest at his job, even though he holds a pretty high position in the Woodsboro Police
Hmm.
Department. Nancy's dad in this movie is not exactly the same, but Nancy's dad as well as his
I think
the
Nancy's dad means
deputy.
well, but he just doesn't get. He doesn't. He's very disconnected with
No,
Nancy.
no, he don't. It's not just him; it's the whole police force. Like
Ah, shit.
they
All right.
think she's crazy. They think she's crazy. Her parents think she's crazy. Even her friends think she's crazy.
All right. Well, hang on. I want to look something up real quick before I make a quick shout out to a certain movie character because I think I have something funny to add on to this. All right.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. All right. All right. Big shout out to the main character from 30 Days a Night because he's the only police person competent enough to at least try and stop all the horror from happening.
Okay.
in a horror movie. Like, you know how
Uh,
horror movie cliches are always the police are incompetent? Well, 30 Days of Night's main
yeah.
character is quite literally a sheriff. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say, I'm
I
not
kind of
saying he
meant. I
does
kind of.
everything so successfully and easily. I mean, it is again, that's a topic for another day, but I just want to make that joke.
Well, yeah. I was kind of more meant in the fact that it's more of a Wes Craven trope more than a horror trope.
Oh, I thought it was always a horror trope, but it's more
It,
Wes
it kind
Craven.
of is a horror trope, but I was kind of. It was kind of more of a. I've always noticed it as more of a Wes Craven thing, just because I'm pretty familiar with his work. So. Uh,
I mean, I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised if it's more of a.
because that's how it is in his theatrical his directorial debut in Last House on the Left, which is kind of his most famous movie before this one, outside of The Hills Have Eyes.
All right.
Because there's a subplot with these two cops, these two kind of goofy cops who are not great at their job,
Are they
but
like the
they're
two
kind of meant to be.
equivalent? Sorry, I was going to make another reference, but keep talking.
But yeah, they're kind of a you know this is a different discussion, but they're very tonally out of place in that movie. But they're very it's a very they're meant to be comic relief, even though again, with that movie, Last House on the Left, is very
Very gory.
well, let's just say trying to input comedy in that movie,
It's just
very
very tone
difficult.
deaf. It's like,
Kind of tone deaf, but
it's like
again,
it's a
it was early in Wes's career, so that's when he was still kind of figuring it out as a
yeah.
director. But
I was gonna say you got me thinking of like these two like dumbass characters from the original Power Rangers show trying to be cops. I don't remember their names, but I'm pretty sure someone from the audience might recognize them. Anyway, that's the
yeah,
first time I ever talked about Power Rangers. Anyways, in a long time. But anyways, Tim, what do you make of all this? What do you make of like Nancy and like the tropes that Wes Craven's? Would you say Wes Craven tropes are pretty influential, Drew?
yeah, especially within the horror genre. Yeah.
All right, all right,
I mean, you have
Tim.
to
What
think
do you?
about it. Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. Not to cut anybody off, but there's a reason that Wes Craven is often called the master of horror because his movies are very influential. I mean, he made not one, not two, but arguably three different movies that revived the horror genre with The Hills Have Eyes in the 1970s, Nightmare on Elm Street in the 80s, and then Scream in the 90s.
All right, Tim. What do you make of all this?
Well, I didn't really hear of Wes Craven. I told you I was never a horror guy. I just don't know much about this stuff really.
All
So,
right,
I wouldn't really know. So this is all news to me. So,
interesting. What about the idea of Nancy? Like how originally he I think one of again someone from Wes
what?
Craven said that like, hey, Wes, can you maybe not make a horror movie where the girl's always just like getting tortured or something? And then he's like, yeah, I can do that. And he made Nancy, who starts off as just like your average damsel, but slowly but surely gets the grasp on how to hopefully try and fight off Freddy. Like, what? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, as long as Freddy gets his comeuppance, which he tends to avoid, which I hear, but but hey Drew, like Freddy does eventually die for good, like he gets killed for good. Does that ever happen, or does he just keep coming back? Like,
So he gets killed in one way or another in every movie, but he does keep coming back. There's no definitive way to kill him. So that is kind of explained in the some of the later movies, some of the later Nightmare movies, but in every film, more or less, he does get killed. So
Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
oftentimes in
and
oftentimes in some pretty painful ways, like
Hmm.
getting decapitated or whatever.
Yeah. Nightmare on Elm Street
So
2, if I remember correctly, that had such a weird way of killing him. Again, I'm sorry. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I don't hate it, but it's just way too goofy. It's just way too goofy.
that's for another time, Nick.
Another time. Another time. I mean, I don't. One thing I don't know. I'll say. Fuck. I'm gonna suck. I'll segue into soon. The effects, the visual effects are pretty darn good for the time. A lot of visuals, a lot of practical effects, Not just
It's you're talking about the first Nightmare on Elm
yeah,
Street,
first
right?
Nightmare, obviously.
Yeah,
First
yeah.
Nightmare.
So again, it's pretty incredible that they accomplished what they accomplished on such a shoestring budget. You know,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know that scene when Freddy is chasing Tina in the dream,
Yeah.
and he's like, watch this, and he takes his glove, well, takes one of the blades of his glove and cuts off two of his fingers,
Mm-hmm.
and you see this like green goo kind of come out, and he
Oh yeah.
kind of smiles like maniacally.
Oh.
You know, not only is that good practical effects, but it also plays into Freddy's character being this sadistic murderer.
Oh yeah.
You know,
And I think what's also really cool is that there's like a scene in near not near the not the very end but near the end where like Nancy well actually I want to say it's the middle where Nancy tries to get Johnny Depp's character to basically watch over while she sleeps, but she doesn't
yeah,
think she's asleep. She goes outside, and then Freddy starts chasing her, and like her whole house starts distorting. Like her stairs start getting holes with
yeah,
like
yeah,
white ooze and everything. And then there's of course
yeah.
the famous scene where Freddy stretches out his arms, just like really long,
Yeah,
like in
that's
some
it.
kind of casket.
That's in a previous scene though.
But
That's
yeah,
in
I'm
that's
I'm
when
talking about
he's
all the parts where I think the visual effects really
yeah, yeah,
shine. And of course, there's
yeah.
of course the death of Johnny Depp's character, who just gets sucked right into the bed sheet and just
Right
blood.
into the bed sheet and then blood
I mean,
everywhere.
I think that's a simple effect to pull off, but like it's still kind of a cool effect to be honest. Like I mean,
Fun fact. So that scene, as well as Tina's death when she's getting flung around the ceiling, right,
hmm
were both filmed in they constructed these rooms that were on like these levers that would like move it around to help achieve that effect.
hmm
And so the for Glenn's death, Johnny Depp's character, they had the room unintentionally kind of tilted slightly, and
hmm
that's how you got a lot of the blood going one way.
that's crazy.
That wasn't necessarily intentional, but it looks cool, so they
Oh
kept
yeah.
it.
There was something I was thinking about, but now I cannot remember. I genuinely, well, I can't remember. Well, if I ever do remember it, yeah, I just think the practical effects were really really cool for the time.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and again, this movie had such a small budget too.
how do they even do all that
Like
stuff on such a
I'm
small budget?
they did it with lighting trickery, camera trickery, or just being really good at their jobs.
That
but
too. I
but
mean,
but a lot of the practical effects, especially the ones that were limited, there's a reason that a lot of it is cast in shadow or low lighting because it's to kind of hide the roughness of it.
that makes sense. That makes sense actually. That yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you use stuff to your
I'm trying
advantage.
to yeah, I'm trying to find what was the budget for this movie.
Hmm.
I'm trying to look that up
Um.
right
Yeah.
now.
Oh, that's what I was trying to look up. The budget. Fudge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
Um.
I
Well,
think
while
it's
you're looking at
on.
the budget, I want
But
to.
so according to Wikipedia, the budget was 1.8 million,
1.8 million. Yeah,
which
that's
you
usually
know,
pretty
which I'm
low. I
sure,
mean, it's
which
not.
which
It's
which to which to people like us, that's like fucking life changing
it
money.
is, yeah, but
But
like, I feel
but in
like
terms of, I mean, this movie was actually made for more money than the original Halloween,
really.
which came out a few years before.
Well,
Um,
my
but
favorite. Hang on, sir. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember something. When you
but
mentioned
but
low
that's also
budgets.
but that's also not accounting. I don't think this budget is accounting for marketing costs.
Oh shoot.
I mean, it may or may not be incorporating marketing costs because that's a whole other
Oh yeah,
expense.
marketing. Like some movies don't ever put in marketing for their like budget and everything. Um,
Yeah,
I was gonna say my favorite film was made on a budget of about $27,000 to $200,000,
yeah.
which I would like to
What
talk.
movie?
Clerks, which I would really love to talk about in the
Clerks.
future.
Okay,
I think that'd
that's
be
in the future.
yeah, but no, but yeah, I
So
feel I feel I feel like I don't know if they did if those people were not like never mind. I forgot what I was going to say. Like, if I were to explain it, it would come out wrong and it'd sound very jumbled. But, anyways, I'm
yeah,
going to talk about the
so
something that. Well,
also there's something interesting. is that, you know, do you know what those? So New Line Cinema, the company that produced and distributed Nightmare on Elm Street,
Yeah.
um, so so they're often referred to as the house that Freddy built. Do you want to know why that is?
Why is that?
It's because so both New Line Cinema as well as Wes Craven personally were both going through financial struggles when they were making this movie. I think according to Robert England, they ran out of money at one point and they had to go get more money. They had to, I guess, pause production, I think, for a little bit to get more money
Hmm.
because I guess they kept running out of money. Because again, that's what those little money they had
Hmm.
in the grand scheme of things. But the movie ended up making five 57.1 million dollars at the box office, which is like 10 times its budget.
Dang.
And so that movie it basically saved New Line Cinema as a company.
Dang, that's impressive.
So
I mean, a horror
yeah.
mascot, a very cruel and vicious killer, ended up saving an entire studio.
And why do you think they rushed out so many sequels?
We're doing a sequel. It's
Yep.
what we do in Hollywood. I don't know the rest of the lyrics of the song. Yeah, I was singing the sequel song from Muppets Most Wanted, which has a lot of good sense. Anyways, Johnny Depp's character, that movie. I mentioned Johnny Depp
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that movie practically kicked off his
That
whole
was,
career. Not
I
only
mean,
did
it
that
was his first
movie
feature
save
film
New
role.
Line, but that was his first feature film, right?
Yeah, it was. It was
Yeah.
his first feature film role, and well. I don't think there's a lot to Glenn's character outside of just being Nancy's boyfriend.
Yeah.
I think he serves the purpose well to the story.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like he actually starts believing in Nancy, and real even though he kind of fails the first time to try and help her, he eventually starts believing.
Yeah,
He's like, okay, I need to stay awake. I could be next, and then
and then he
eventually,
goes to sleep.
yeah, I could just
He goes to
I
sleep.
could just imagine like every time I think of like people trying to stay awake, I think of that freaking scene from Finding Nemo where Marlin's like trying to swim through all the jumps. Stay awake, stay awake. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um. Cause to be honest, when you bring that up, like most of Nancy's friends are just cannon fodder, are just fodder for the killer. But I
yeah,
think in a
but
way they slowly build up to how eventually Nancy becomes next. It's just like okay, you may have escaped
well, I
this
think,
dream.
I think, obviously in the mid '80s, that's when a million different studios were doing the sort of body count slasher type thing in the vein of like Friday the 13th or some of the Halloween sequels. And so this movie is kind of a contrast in the sense that I mean I think only like four people die in the movie. Like it's not
Or
this doesn't have a
yeah,
super high
this the
kill
body count's
count.
pretty low on that.
Yeah, yeah, but I think
Unlike the sequels.
but like each character actually serves somewhat of a purpose, even if it's not
Yeah,
like a super, even if it's not like a
they make those
super like
kills
elaborate
count. They
purpose.
make them count.
Yeah, so Tina serves as kind of like a false protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Rod is the red herring, and
Glenn.
Glenn is the supportive boyfriend,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is like the only one who even remotely believes what Nancy is saying. Like there's a scene after Glenn dies when Nancy's talking on the phone with Donald, her dad, and she's like, I know who did it, I know who did it. Uh, and he's like, just tell me who did it. I'll go get him. And then she's like, Freddy Krueger did it. And he's like, yeah, yeah, sure. In a very like obviously he doesn't believe her
Hmm.
sort of manner. Because again,
Interesting.
they think Freddy Krueger's dead.
Yeah.
Like to them, he's dead. Like they killed him. Like they burned him alive. They killed him.
Hmm.
So it's like nobody believes that she's. And to be fair, and honestly, this kind of bugs me. I normally don't like to complain about. I don't normally like to complain about these kind of logical consistencies or inconsistencies, but Marge, her mom, literally saw Nancy pull a hat out of her dream in
Yeah.
the
That that
in the
that that's something
clinic.
I bought up. That's something I bought up. Honestly.
Yeah, but it's like, how do you not believe her? Like she literally pulled the hat out of her dream. How do you not believe her? I mean, if somebody was in a bed and suddenly pulled the fucking hat out of her dream, it's like, what?
Again, that's
Like
kind of the thing
at
with
that
like
point,
what you mentioned earlier with
at
Wes
that point,
Craven, with Wes Craven films, that everybody but the protagonist is incompetent, which
it's not always true necessarily. Um,
but when you mentioned
but
Wes Craven being like the master of horror, I feel like a lot of his tropes went on to like influence a bunch of other movies within the genre, along with maybe other directors.
well, it did, yeah.
All right, Tim, I know you just walked away, but what do you? I'm putting the spotlight on you again. What do you make of all this? From like when we talked about the supporting cast and how even though Friday for Nightmare on Elm Street has like a low kill count, but they make those kills mean something and count. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I know that you guys talked about the whole budget thing with I don't know which movie, but you guys did mention the whole budget thing, and I was just I don't know, it seems interesting focusing on Nancy or whatever she's doing, and she's trying to she's trying to get people to believe that
Freddie.
Freddy is alive again and everything. Just what you were just going to I'm like I don't know if there should be like a prequel series with Freddy or Nancy. Just I don't know, just something to get the juices flowing. So
Hmm.
I don't actually don't have a lot to say about it. So I
All
would
right.
just say
Yeah,
it's interesting.
just you're just outsider looking in. That's all.
Well, have you seen
Yeah,
any of these tropes or cliches pop up in some of the movies or TV shows that you've watched?
I've seen a parody of it on Simpsons
Oh yeah, Treehouse of
Treehouse of
Horror.
Horror.
I think Simpsons kind of way makes fun of the whole idea that the killer's in your dreams, like, oh yeah, lucid dreaming. But well, I think that's what Nightmare 3 touches on. I didn't see it, but I read about it where it actually makes a return to Nancy.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that movie, not to get too deep into that movie, but she actually got a job working at the at basically a mental hospital for like people who are having bad dreams and stuff.
Hmm.
And so she's kind of like a counselor to these kids who are having these bad dreams. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm trying to think what else did I want to talk about in regards to this movie because
Open the
there's
notebook.
yes, open the notebook. Let's see
I
here.
think what's
Nightmare on
kind
Elm
of
Street
I think
notes.
like what's kind of interesting with Nightmare on Elm Street specifically is that compared to other slasher films at the time, like I feel like in a way they kind of have more. I know I mentioned that the Nightmare sequels are goofy, but in a way, like even though as brutal as Freddy can kill people, like think of the way Tina dies or like freaking
Yeah,
Johnny Depp dies, Glenn, like I mean, yeah, you got the other guy, the other dude who dies early on in the film. Ross was his
Rod,
name. Rod, not
Rod.
Ross. Sorry, Rod. Rod kind of just basically gets hung by a rope, but like Tina gets just kind of like flung around and beaten and stuff. Where Glenn just gets absorbed to his bed and like blood volcano. I think in a
Yeah.
way, they kind of exercise more creative kills, and they give Freddy more of a not a menacing process, not just be like the standing and whether it be like the tough, just invincible killing machine like Jason, or the more crazy maniacal freaking Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I almost said Chainsaw Man. But I feel like in a way, Freddy, because he's fully aware he's killing people. He's just like, hey, I'm gonna kill you. You can't run away. Like I feel like in a way, Freddy is kind of more of that fun. He definitely has more of a fun essence to him in a way. He stands out from
Well,
other killers as well.
well, do you know how else he stands out from Michael and Jason? Is that Freddy actually has a personality
Oh yeah, that's true.
and he
Yeah, he
actually
definitely has a
talks.
personality. I mean,
And he actually talks and
yeah, and
interacts with his victims
yeah,
beyond
like
just killing
every
them.
other killer also wears a mask, so you can't see their face. Whereas Freddy's just like, "Hey, look at this beautiful face. You're gonna die, by the way." I know, I'm
Yeah,
kind of
and
acting
it's
good.
like
I know. I'm not trying to make fun of Freddy, but that's the way. Freddy has a personality. He has fun. He toys with his victims, and whereas every other slasher before him, those were just either they were either maniacal and crazy, or they were just like, invincible, non-killable machine like Michael and
Well,
Jason.
well, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say Michael and Jason are more like the cold, emotionless,
Yeah.
killers.
Yeah, I
As
do.
whereas Freddy, he genuinely seems to be like with Michael and Jason, like you don't know their emotions behind how they feel about what they're doing. They probably don't have any emotions. It's kind of the point, you know.
Mhm.
But with Freddy, it's like he genuinely seems like he gets off on people suffering,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
which
know if
which kind of
there's
which
was
kind of makes him a bit more, which can make him a bit more. At least this incarnation of Freddy in the first movie, you can kind of say it makes it a bit more scary because there are unfortunately sadistic people in the world.
yeah, yeah.
But
I feel like the
and
closest
it's
to
like
sorry, you first.
and it's like the fact that somebody is enjoying it as much as they are with as much as Freddy is can make it a bit more can make it more feel more terrifying in that sense
Yeah.
because it's not normal for a human to have those kind of emotions with these kind of
Yeah.
actions.
I feel like in a way Freddy has kind of made filmmakers try and fake and put more personality into their killers. I mean, I don't know. Did The Exorcist come before Nightmare on Elm Street, or did it come after?
Way before.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
Forget The
yeah,
Exorcist,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
I feel like I'm
yeah,
gonna be
the
I feel like I'm gonna
Exorcist
be
came out in
diving into V
73.
movie territory, like maybe the Leprechaun movies or freaking I want to say maybe Happy Death Day, because the killer's face does get shown in that movie. But well, if you've seen the movie, you probably know something, but I won't spoil it until maybe we discuss that later.
Yeah, I haven't seen Happy Death Day, so
But
don't
I
spoil it.
feel I feel like I don't know if you can ever do another maybe like more personality driven killer in a horror movie that isn't Freddy, because if you do try and give your killer too much personality, you get some kind of goofy B movie or maybe a Scooby
Which
Doo
is
villain.
also which is ironically ultimately what Freddy becomes in the later movies, unlike
Oh yeah,
in
trust
Nightmare on
me,
Elm Street
trust
5,
me.
6, and 7.
Yeah, again, Nightmare 2. I mean, I love the visual effects in that movie, but again, too goofy, too goofy. But I'm not trying to say a horror movie can have like its fun moments, but like I feel like nowadays, I feel like there may ever another may never ever be another killer like Freddy Krueger.
Well, yeah, and because Freddy is he's very unique in the sense that his personality and as well as the way he attacks his victims in their dreams. That's
Mm,
very uniquely almost like it's almost a trademark of Freddy,
mm,
right? To where it's like if you try to do a similar killer, you'd probably just get accused of copying Nightmare on Elm Street.
yeah. I think Tusk kind of did something similar, but it wasn't more like goofy, happy, let's toy with the viewers. Like, because like there's a scene in Tusk where the main one of the main characters is like crying and screaming, and the killer, the evil guy, he starts mocking him. Like, I don't know if that's anything similar to what Freddy does or anything. Does Freddy ever mock anybody in the movies? Because I don't think he mocked anybody in freaking Nightmare 1.
I don't think so. I mean, besides that finger chopping moment, I don't think so.
Yeah, because
When he
again,
cut off his own fingers.
yeah, and I know again Texas Chainsaw, the family did kind of mock the main heroine in that movie, but again, it
Oh,
was just it was just them
yeah,
mocking. It was
absolutely.
just them mocking her crying and screaming. Whereas Freddy got completely toy like, oh, there's an exit. Nope, it's not there. And he can do like this. I'm hypothetically speaking, he can do like a little Wile E. Coyote tunnel, making the person think that's the exit. But it's like, nope. I, I mean, am I not wrong? Is that something he could do?
Oh my God, why did they not do it in one of those like spoof shows like Robot Chicken or something? That's
Dude.
such a good idea.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm gonna redirect it to our judge. Tim, what do you make of the things we just said about Freddy Krueger?
Well, yeah, well, it's certainly good to hear you guys know your stuff on Nightmare on Elm Street. That's incredible. Just it's cool, man. Just yeah, but but I personally wouldn't watch Freddy because it's just I don't know, like I know that he's terrifying and stuff, but it just isn't. It doesn't suit me in general. So
I know,
I wouldn't
but from the outsider looking in,
and what bothers me.
From the outsider looking at to ask you,
Bothers me is that
do you think if from what we've described, do you think that comedy does make him a little scary from the outsider looking in? We're not asking to watch film. We're asking you, do you agree with us that maybe this sense of like personality and somewhat mild comedy makes Freddy kind of scary combined with his powers?
yeah, I know that he's supposed to be like very supposed to be, like make sick jokes and all that, like very just tries to be humorous and everything while being terrifying. Of course, he's just I know that the later films cross that at all, and he's a straight up how do I say this? Like I know that the remake he makes him a lot. They make him a lot worse, and so. But at least the originals. He had at least had some twisted, charming personality, just trying to be funny. But I would say that's one thing I do like about him. So, but what amazes me is that there's no like MacGuffin or any holy water that would permanently kill him. So, which is I find that strange. See what what I'm saying?
Yeah, and as I mentioned
Trust,
earlier,
trust,
but if
trust
you
me, trust me when trust me when I say that in the realm of horror series, that is not strange at all in the realm of like horror movies.
yeah,
But again, as somebody like you who's not into horror movies, I can see why you would find that strange.
yeah, yeah, it is a bit strange as I mentioned before. I think something like the Leprechaun movies tried to do that, but the Leprechaun movies, from my point of view at least, I haven't seen them, but from all the stuff I've seen, they do lean more into the goofy B movie kind of side of things because the Leprechaun Killer looks like it has kind of a personality, but that or I'm overthinking it and I'm just spreading misinformation just to make myself look smart. I don't know.
Although I will say, Tim, it's funny that you mentioned Holy Water because I believe he is killed by Holy Water in Nightmare 3.
The
So
power of Christ compels you. But
yeah,
that's
yeah,
just well,
they put they it's kind of complicated, but they pour holy water on his remains. So
yeah. So I just want to get your 2 cents
like
on
I said, complicated. But
killers having like a slasher film having a personality that effectively works instead of just being completely silly. That was just my little question. Yeah, but
Well, I'm surprised that he isn't burnt again, like to permanently kill him, like because he did originally die by fire. But I'm surprised that his remains weren't burnt, so he doesn't come back.
they tried to kill him by burning in the second movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like I kind of said earlier, there's each movie has a different way of killing him, but
Yeah.
there's no definitive or a consistent way to kill him for good.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah,
That's all. I
Yeah.
mean,
So he.
I don't really have much else to say
Yeah.
about any other detailed nightmare unless we want to conclude it. Because I think if we're going to conclude it, we should probably explain. We should probably summarize everything we just said about this film. I mean, Drew, do you got more to say? Tim, you got more to say?
uh,
Oh, consult the notebook.
not really.
I'm
Not
sorry.
really.
I'm not
But
trying to rush this episode,
that's
by the way.
pretty
I'm
much
just saying, like we've.
yeah. We pretty much discussed everything that was in the notebook. Admittedly, when I was rewatching Nightmare on Elm Street last night, I kind of stopped taking notes about halfway through because it was just kind of ruining it.
Yeah.
Um,
But here's the
but
thing. Sorry, you first, Drew.
I would also like to talk about some of the more somewhat more technical aspects of the movie, like um, we haven't talked about any of the performances, for example,
Oh, the
from either Heather
performances. Yeah.
Langenkamp, who plays Nancy. I think she really adds a lot of innocence, but also a lot of like charm to that role.
Yeah.
Um, she also there's also I think what's so great about this casting specifically, and I think what Wes Craven was so good at was that and in both his writing as well as the way he directed his actors, even when the characters were in his movies were teenagers, they didn't ever feel annoying or any of like the cliche stereotypes of like a typical jock or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, Glenn's character, Johnny Depp's character, that frail guy, he's supposed to be the jock, quote unquote, and
Hmm.
it's very it is not at all. You know, he is not. He is like that's as far as from a jock character as you can get.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, but anyways, yeah, is that all you had, or is there any more? Because I've run
I
out
mean,
of
it's kind
stuff.
of it's kind of that's that kind of sums up that part of it. I think.
All
You
right.
know, I just think that you know, makes the characters more
Oh
interesting
yeah.
and
Oh, I forgot to add
and
on. I want to add on to Nancy's mother. Whoever played her did a
yeah,
cool job. So what I found interesting about Nancy's mother is that she's sort of like the typical mother, but as eventually Nancy started becoming more rebellious, in order to try and find a way to fight Freddy Krueger, Nancy's mother just kind of becomes more depressed, thinking like her daughter's gone insane, and just because like not only has Freddy Krueger taken a mental toll on Nancy, but she's also taking a mental toll on her mother.
yeah, and it
Indirectly
was
too.
interesting
Indirectly,
rewatching.
by the way. Indirectly.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because you know when especially later in the movie when Nancy starts to directly confront her about Freddy Krueger, or even really before that, it's like she fucking knows about Freddy Krueger because she was one of the people who helped burn him alive. It's
Yeah.
like she fucking knows about Freddy Krueger. She seems almost in denial about you know Freddy coming back and haunting their kids in her dreams in their dreams.
Yeah.
And it's like when she's explaining to Nancy about what who Freddy was and all that, it's like she seems she seems kind of guilty. Not in the fact that they killed Freddy, of course, but more in that she kept that information from her
Hmm. Yeah.
for so long.
That makes sense.
And it's like a major theme of this movie is kind of like what I explained earlier, where it's like, you know, the sins of the parents are coming back to haunt, well, to re-haunt the parents, I guess, but also to haunt their children as well.
Yeah. That makes. Yeah.
You know, there's that. It's the theme of the kids paying for the actions of their parents.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize the movie had more than a lot of themes. Honestly, that's
Movies
crazy.
can have more than one theme, Nick.
Uh huh. Yep. I am aware. I am
Yeah,
aware.
that's what I. That's one of the. You know, that's what I think in terms of like, you know, when you know, because A Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, is not. It's not just some horror schlock, right? It's more than that. It
Hmm.
has this theme of you know the kids paying for the sins of the parents, and well as all these like psychological underpinnings of what happens to you mentally as you have to watch out for to not die from a killer, but also how your mental state just sort of degrades as if you don't sleep.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cool. That's all I got. That's all I got.
That's all I got
I mean,
too.
I mean, I
So Tim, did all what I just talked about, did all that make sense to you?
Yeah, it did.
So, Tim,
All right.
as the neutral party, the jury of this, after everything we've explained, would you say that A Nightmare on Elm Street is very important and very significant overall in terms of not just horror but cinema and culture in general?
Well, you can't deny that's super popular. So, I mean, if it's had such an since it's such a had an impact on the horror industry, I mean, oh, go figure. You know, go nuts. I mean, if it's since it's that popular, I mean, I don't see why it. You know, it's obviously a classic for a reason. So, yeah. So who's to say? So.
Nice, nice. All right. Yeah, because again, after no, after like when most people, if you look at Nightmare on Elm Street on like its surface layer, it's just like a normal slasher movie, typical of the '80s. But there's a lot more depth to it through the
There is.
characters, the not just the concept, but just the idea of people dying, people like being killed in their sleep, and the overall the many themes of it, and just It's just you just see how well crafted of a film it is,
Yeah.
and that's why I think Nightmare on Elm Street, because of those, have ultimately placed a legacy and is placed its status as a classic.
Yeah, it's a class, a staple of, when people say, oh, 80s horror was so good, and one of the movies they think of is Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, yeah,
And there's
yeah,
a reason for that.
yeah. Well, so I think we all agree Nightmare on Elm Street is cinema
Amazing.
and absolutely incredible
It's,
and a
it's, it's,
footstone in movies. And with that,
it,
we are
it,
going.
it is absolute cinema.
Yep. Again, if we ever get an artist in the audience, draw Drew as the Martin Scorsese meme. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this has been working title Why Horror Matters, a subseries of our podcast. We hope
The
you've
Movie
enjoyed
Mortis
this
podcast.
episode and have a good night and sweet dreams.
You'll never sleep again.
Bye.